Welcome back to a new episode of Rich Lessons. Today we welcome our guest, Karen Freeman Wilson. Thank you
No relation. My last name Wilson, too.
True, no relation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with both of you. Your distinguished careers, the work that you're doing in the community, in tech, it's an honor.
Thank you. So before we jump in, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio. Karen instructed me to read a small piece of it, not all of it. So Karen Marie Freeman Wilson is an American attorney, former judge, and politician who served as Indiana Attorney General from 2000 to 2001, as well as mayor of Gary, Indiana from 2012 to 2019. And I want to say she made history as the first female mayor and the first African-American woman to lead the city of Indiana. And now she serves as the president and CEO of the Chicago Urban League since 2020. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much.
was that good to you've done a lot.
Perfect.
Though. We're gonna get into it. You've done a lot, even though you trying to. So we're just gonna start early. Gary, Indiana, born and raised.
Yes.
Tell me about growing up in Gary.
So growing up in Gary was much like many of the legacy cities in the Midwest, and even in parts of the East Coast like Buffalo, Cleveland, Flint, Detroit. It was an amazing childhood because you had cities that were firmly built on industry, and so you had a really vibrant working class, a solid middle class. And, for instance, at one point at the time that I was in the public school system, Gary had one of the highest paid and most well-regarded public school systems in the country. So people would flock from all over to teach in Gary. And so I saw that as a kid. I saw a vibrant downtown. There was an arts culture. Like, I'm a musical person because I saw all of these musicals, South Pacific, you name it, I saw it in Gary. And then when industry declined, when all of the things that impact an urban center, white flight, all of those things happened at the same time. And then there was a decision to have a financial impact at the state level. So the tax structure changed. And it was almost like a financial tsunami in terms of the property taxes on Gary. And there was just a very, very distinct decline. And so I saw that too. And it was these almost two experiences that led me to say, I want to do something about this. I mean, as a kid, I had the unique distinction or unique opportunity to meet the first Black mayor, Richard Hatcher. And so after meeting him, I was like, I want to be the mayor, even as a 7-year-old. But as I saw the city decline, I said, I want to do something about it.
Yeah, my reference points for Gary, Indiana are, of course, like Michael Jackson and the Jackson family, which I'm sure a lot of people probably say this. And I always hate to say the same thing that people always say when they reference somewhere. But the second thing is knowing that the city essentially is like 85% African American, and that always stood out to me as well. When I think about like Flint, Michigan,
Yes.
even like New Orleans, the trials and tribulations to get resources and the things that you need for cities that have large populations of African Americans.
Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah,
For sure.
see it.
For sure. When you think about cities like that, there is an inherent bias that plays out in state houses, sometimes in county seats, where people make the assumption that there's fraud, that there's corruption, that there's incompetence. And if you look at leaders in those communities, and this was long before I became mayor, you're talking about people who were at the top of their class. You're talking about people who had to excel. And the fact that just because of the color of their skin, very often, people had a certain assumption and not only used it to impact their lives, but used it to impact the lives of the community is really unfortunate.
Yeah, it makes me think of a story that all the Louisiana politicians. So I helped lead the first campaign of Mayor Sharon Weston Broome,
Sure.
who was the first African American woman mayor of Baton Rouge.
Good friend.
Yes. Love. Shout out to Mayor Broome.
Yes.
And we talked about the legislature and how people from Grambling. So the president of Grambling, the story is that every year he would drive up to the Capitol, but he would get out of his Mercedes, he would get in a pickup truck, he would take his suit off, and he would basically put on different overhauls, and he would go up to the Capitol to get money
Sure.
for the school.
That's it.
Because if he went up in a Mercedes, decked out in a nice suit, it would have been too intimidating. And people would have thought, well, what are you doing with the money? Because you carry yourself like this or like that.
That is sad, actually.
And so, that's how the story goes. And it's unfortunate that those type of perceptions are placed on particularly African Americans who are running institutions of higher learning, are running cities, right, that are majority Black.
And you rarely think about unconscious bias in those terms, but that has a very real and widespread impact on people and communities.
Yeah.
Gary, Indiana, when you were there, you were mayor. What would you say at the time, especially with some of like your biggest challenges?
So, as mayor of Gary and someone who started in 2012, it was right at the time that the state's tax structure changed in a way that we lost about $26 million of our property tax income. And that was like my first day in office. So the day before, you have $26 million that you can use to serve people. And then the next day, you don't have that money. And you don't have a recourse for replacing it. Whereas prior to my time, you did have an appeals process. But that appeals process ended. And, but, this was something that I ran 3 times for. And so it wasn't like I could go in and spend all of this time talking about losing that tax revenue. Mm-hmm. It was an opportunity to go in and say, we can lead, we can solve hard problems, and we can do it in a way that says to citizens, you expect more. And so I was big not only on solving the fiscal challenges of the community, but also saying to people, you have a responsibility to be civically engaged beyond voting, and I have a responsibility to respond to you, even if the news is not what I think you want to hear. And so that's the kind of rapport that we were able to build with our citizens. And it was not until we or moved away from that and started legislating and spending the time in Indianapolis to deliver, but forgot to tell folks, hey, we're spending time in Indianapolis to deliver, that people were like, well, what is she doing? Why isn't she in the city? Why is she in Indianapolis? Why is she in DC? One of the challenges that you have is that when you don't have resources locally, you got to go and find them somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. And ultimately, cost an election. But, for me as an individual, it was a better outcome versus literally leading an under-resourced community for more than 2 terms.
Yeah. And you were also attorney general. I also feel that Black women who become attorney generals get placed on a different pedestal and platform and are held to very different standards. We can look at like Kamala Harris. We can look at attorney general in New York, and it's like on and on and on. How was that experience for you? Did you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. There was a different experience. In fact, so I fulfilled a guy's unexpected term and got a call out of the blue. Are you interested in being the attorney general? My focus from a kid, I told you, had been on mayor, right? And so when they said attorney general, I was like, I don't know. But the governor had called me about 2 months before, and he had said, hey, Myra Selby is stepping down from the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court. Are you interested? And I was like, that would be like watching paint dry. So I was like, really respectfully, Governor, I appreciate you thinking about me, but no. So, if I'm going to get those calls, which is a tremendous honor, you can't keep telling people no, right? So when they talked about AG, I said yes. And, of course, it's the chief legal officer in the state. But there are so many aspects, certainly in Indiana and other states, of being the attorney general that has to do with protecting people, the consumer facing work of the AG. For us, it was also about nursing homes. And so the Attorney General had the ability to regulate nursing homes. And in Indiana, nursing homes were just, places that you sent people to die. Mm-hmm. And so we changed that. And even the work in the consumer space. So by the time I was about 4 months in, I think the folks at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce decided we don't need her in that office. They sent $700,000 to Indiana about the last 30 days of our campaign, because it was, the entire time I was in office, I was also campaigning to be reelected. But it was that experience. But the thing that I loved about it was the ability to direct the tobacco dollars, because I also went in when the tobacco settlement nationwide was being distributed. I was able to direct that totally to health. And Indiana was the only state that directed 100% of the tobacco proceeds to health and health-related issues. So I enjoyed it. It was short-lived, but I enjoyed it. And the good thing was, I was like, okay, so now I can get back focused on being the mayor.
Right.
You talked about, both of you ladies have actually talked about, the level of expectations being a Black mayor, especially a female mayor, being an attorney general. What's so interesting, though, is that you're put on this pedestal, almost like, are you going to be able to do it or not? But you have the accolades to back it up. I mean, you are a Harvard grad.
Sure. Yes.
And I guess it still doesn't matter how. I guess we've seen it with Obama. We've seen it with Michelle Obama. We've seen it with a lot of amazing Black politicians. It's like, even no matter what school you go to, even that doesn't matter sometimes. How do you feel like that? First off, let me ask, Harvard. Why Harvard?
So, I don't think you guys have enough time, but the funny thing is that Harvard was my third choice.
Now you have to tell us the first two.
Well, the first one was General Motors Institute in Flint, Michigan. Mm-hmm. Because in 1978, when I graduated from high school, Black engineers, and particularly Black female engineers, were hot, right? So if you knew math, if you knew science, that's where they pushed you. I knew math. I didn't do well in science, despite the grades that I got. I got good grades, but it was like a real struggle. But they would direct me in that direction, and being the 17-year-old high school graduate, General Motors, sell Pontiacs, discounted 1978 Pontiac Trans Am. I had the color picked out. So that was my focus coming out of high school. And then I went to the plant. I went to the Bedford Foundry maybe 2 weeks after I graduated to start working. It was 110 degrees inside that foundry. I immediately called my mother and I said, I don't think this school is going to work out. Can you possibly call Notre Dame and see if I can still come? And they were like, no, we don't have any housing. It's almost July. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, can you call Harvard? And that my mother, God rest her soul, was the person, you talk about an advocate. Not only did she sell uniforms for the band, but she made these calls in late June, early July to see if I could go to the schools that I finally woke up and said, yeah, that's probably a place I should go. And so I said, well, call Harvard. And they were like, she called the guy who actually interviewed me for the school. And he, with her, became my advocates. And that's how I ended up at Harvard. But, when I got there, it was like, well, number one, I knew I wasn't leaving without a degree because my father was furious. Not that I didn't go to General Motors or Notre Dame, but that I had started something and not finished it in his eyes. Now, on a golf course, he was bragging that I was at Harvard. But, it took him about 3 months to really, thaw out and be okay with me again. But as homesick as I was in Cambridge, I was like, no, you have to finish this one.
You know how high expectations you got to have for your dad to like, you know what? You didn't finish. You at Harvard, okay, but you didn't finish what you started.
You didn't finish what you started. And that was always his thing. He wasn't, he wanted me to get good grades. He had a standard in terms of education, but, just basic things. Tell the truth. Finish what you started. Those are the things that he was really, really, serious about. And as an only child, I was a daddy's girl. So the fact that I had disappointed him, I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna leave here without one degree. It just so happened that I got comfortable and stayed for law school. So he was cool.
It worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
It almost sounds like my dad. I was not at Harvard, so it's not to that level. But yeah, when I started my tech company, my dad was like, yeah, you got 2 degrees. You need to go get a job, a 9 to 5. So I do understand. So we'll fast forward to a little bit of where you are now.
Yes.
Chicago Urban League. So mayor of Gary, Indiana, didn't get reelected.
Right.
And then how do you find yourself in Chicago? Because Chicago also is, historically, looking at your career, you've always been big on like changing cities' images, economic development, or working for the disparity of those issues. Why Chicago and why Chicago Urban League?
So you put it so nicely. I actually lost that election. And, I always remind myself of that because it is really evidence of what people often know, that you can think something is a loss and, God makes it a win. And for me, that is what happened, because not only did I get an opportunity to go to Chicago and do the same things that I was doing in Gary, but I didn't have to worry about garbage, potholes, or snow. I'm like, I see garbage. Somebody ought to call the mayor about that. Because now I can do those things that I'm really passionate about in Chicago, and I can do it in partnership with the city and the county and the state and with corporate leaders in the city of Chicago. But to your point, in terms of the image, I understood very quickly that the Urban League and other nonprofit organizations and corporate entities had a responsibility to really let people see the Chicago that we see every day and that we understand. And that is not to say that there aren't challenges, like in many cities in terms of crime and poverty and things that you know that cities need, but it's also to say we have to be in control of our narrative. And that was an experience that I had in Gary. And so I was able to come in and not only do that at the league, but also do it in council to Mayor Lightfoot at the time and now Mayor Johnson.
Nice.
You it's interesting. So we had a chance to meet because
Yes, we did.
speaking of your work in Chicago, it was seeing people who stopped by. So when we met, it was they were doing a housing event.
Yes. It was a
In
housing
Chicago,
fair.
and so Chicago Urban League, led by Miss Karen, was a lot of people to come inside. They had vendors
Yes.
everywhere. I mean, it was from maybe like from 9 to 3, and when I
Yes.
tell you, people at like 9 o'clock was showing up.
They were
And
outside the door.
They were outside the door,
Yeah.
and it was so interesting because as I'm there, I'm hearing the people from the South Side of Chicago, the West Side of Chicago, speak to how they were so grateful that these programs were going on because they couldn't get housing and they didn't have the direction of how to get housing, and you all are putting those programs together.
Yes.
For you in leading the Urban League, again, specifically in Chicago, you seem to be someone who is very focused on being on the ground and listening, have a very listening ear to the community. Because I consistently heard that when I was there. For you, what is it you going to the community more? Because again, I'm hearing the people that as they're coming in and out. Chicago Urban League has been there for a while, and I'm pretty sure they've done amazing things for years.
Sure. Yep.
But you've really stepped up in your time there. Like, what do you feel is your differentiator?
So I appreciate your observation and just being there and seeing that when I went to the Urban League just generally across the country under the leadership of Mark Morial and the National Urban League, we tend to have a more of an economic corporate reputation in a lot of communities. And that was certainly the case when I got to Chicago. But having been the mayor, I was always in the community, doing something. And so when McDonald's came to me and said, hey, we pass out lunches or we pass out baskets for Thanksgiving. You want to come and do that? I'm like, yes, I want to come and do that. And, it didn't matter it was 30 degrees outside. But also when people from the community come to me and say, will you come to our picnic? Or will you come to our protest? Or I did that too, in addition to going to the meetings downtown, in City Hall, in the boardrooms, because I know that is all an intersection with the league's work, right? And so I have to show up on 79th Street, and then I have to show up on LaSalle Street because that's important to the community. And then I enjoy doing it. And so the day that we were in the housing fair, we were able to do that work. But, a week later, I was teaching boots on the ground at our Juneteenth event. So, and then what people often see about me is that I just enjoy having fun, understanding that there are times that you have to be serious, but life is far too short to be so serious that you don't enjoy life at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on Chicago and where you feel Chicago's going, but also Chicago today. I always think about Chicago particularly and most recently, one, because I spent time there and I worked there, but I was in LA recently and they had like the mass protests
Sure.
against you know, our president sending on the troops that descended upon
Yeah.
California in general. So there's a fight there. And I think about Chicago because I'm thinking Chicago is on the list, right? And so I'm wondering, you know, your thoughts around that in this current climate and how Chicago plays a role. And Chicago has not been, like Mayor Johnson has not been one to miss words or hide.
No, he's not hiding.
For better or for worse, he says what he, you know,
Yeah.
feels needs to be said.
Yes.
But I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts and how do you think Chicago moves in this current climate?
You know, that's great question, because you're right. Both Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker have been unequivocal in their support of all of our residents. And I think that's important because Chicago, while still one of the most segregated cities in the country, is a city that is totally diverse. It's like a third white, a third Latinx, and then a third Black. And actually, you know, those numbers vary from year to year. And so I think that it is important to know that your leaders, both elected and otherwise, are going to stand up for you. It is important to be consistent no matter who is in the White House in terms of, you know, either the law is the law or it's not. Either you believe in diversity or you don't. And the thing that's been so disheartening about those in corporate America and in other places is that 4 years ago, they were allies. They were standing with people saying, we understand your pain from 400 years of this treatment and of 400 years. And it's not like it happened 400 years ago. It happened yesterday, right? So we get it. And now all of a sudden, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So now, were you lying then or are you lying now?
Right.
I don't know. But for Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker and President Preckwinkle and, you know, a handful of the CEOs, I don't have a problem with you talking about it in a different way. I know that there are times that you have to deliver the same message to a different audience in a different way. I don't want you to spend a whole lot of time defending lawsuits. But what I do want you to do is affirm your values and live your values. So when I look at a McDonald's, I think they're affirming and living their values. Mm-hmm. But there's some other folks that are saying, well, you know, we can't do that anymore. Well, why can't you do that anymore? You know, because you have employees who need you to do that.
Right.
And I think that's particularly disheartening, has to be, if you are a member of the LGBTQ plus community. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, there has to be a level of fear there, right? Because they have just totally flipped the script there. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, so yes, elections have consequences. We understand that. But it should never change the core of our values: democracy, what's right, what's wrong. And that's what I fear is happening right now.
Like basic humanity.
Yeah,
right?
humanity.
Like we are all humans. We
right.
are all trying to make better lives for ourselves. We were all trying to, you know, accomplish things to move forward in life. Like no one is purposely trying to go backwards for the most part.
Oh, yes.
Well,
yeah. Speaking of, even, you know, with this bill that we're currently was it the I don't know why it's called Beautiful.
Big Beautiful.
I can't even say it because it's like the fact that it's called Beautiful. It just makes me not. But even kind of keeping that, even to Chicago, the amount of people who are going to be impacted. You're right. You know, I go to Chicago, and I always say Chicago, like a few other cities, I call it the tale of two cities.
Yes.
Because if I'm in like North Chicago, if I'm out by Lake Lanier, it's not Lake Lanier,
Lake
Lake
Michigan.
Michigan.
Yes.
Think about Atlanta. Good gosh.
Yeah.
Lake Michigan, I'm looking at one world.
Oh, yeah.
And then I go,
And all you have to do is travel 2 miles south.
it looks,
And it's a totally different place.
and just those 2 miles, not saying that the big ugly bill won't impact people up north.
Right.
But the level that it will impact people in South Chicago.
Oh, absolutely.
What are your thoughts, one, on the bill, but two, as a leader of the Urban League, because you're already doing things as far as like housing and the other things that are impacting them before this bill hopefully doesn't, but potentially goes into true effect.
Yes.
I think he signed it July 4th.
Yeah. What is that? What are your thoughts? One on the bill, but two, as the leader, the CEO of the Urban League, where are you shifting now? Because you know they're going to need even more help now.
That's exactly right. So, you know, you think about just the day-to-day impact of this bill on SNAP benefits, on school lunch, on health care, on the departments that this bill will impact, like the Department of Education, on clean energy. You know, one of the things that folks don't often talk about in Chicago is the impact of abandoned buildings and the pollution that comes from industry, very often industry like the industry in Indiana right across the border, on the environment. And so there had been a major movement with the Inflation Reduction Act to reduce the impact of that environmental, of those environmental effects. And so now you're repealing many parts of the Inflation Reduction Act. You are repealing things that the EPA was doing to protect people. And you're saying that's not important because we want to support business. But what you're really doing with this act is a major transfer. I called it legislative genocide because you're doing a transfer from not just poor people, but from a majority of people to a handful of billionaires. Mm-hmm. Like there are 900 billionaires in the country. And none of them are in this room. Yet they spent a concerted amount of time in Congress to pass this bill that is, you know, I remember the contract with America. Mm-hmm. This is like a contract on America, on everybody.
That's true.
You know? And so now in Chicago, where a third of folks are already struggling, you're going to struggle more. And that's where places like the Urban League come in. And what my colleagues in the nonprofit community and I have been talking about is how we really have to move together in lockstep. You know, one of the things that really hit home for us was that on June 18th, we had our annual job fair. We had twice the number of people show up, standing in line on a very warm day looking for a job. Typically, our high mark has been about 1,800. We had 3,000 people who showed up in person and 5,000 people online.
Yeah.
So it was pretty significant.
And I know we talked about this before, but most people think like, oh, this is an attack on the poor, when in fact, working class, middle class, even upper class are going to feel the impact to their jobs. I was talking about a friend of mine who works at a hospital, and their hospital CEO sent out an email for the first, he never seen an email from the CEO saying, go email, call your Congress people now because we might be trying to save our hospital. And so no one's thinking about the impact across the board. And my grandmother always used to say, poor people, we figure out a way. We gonna make a way to survive. But who feel suffering and who don't like to suffer the most? Middle and upper class people.
That's right. That's right, because they're not used to it.
Yes, so they're going to be suffering too.
When's the last time they clipped a coupon?
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And the reality is, you're right, because they are not poor. They're middle class. They're upper middle class. Mm-hmm. And their standard will change, because if the hospital closes, if the grocery store doesn't have a number of patrons that they typically have, that's going to change their standard of living. And your CEO got it. But I'm not sure that the retailers really got it in enough time for them to try and act.
Yeah.
And certainly the folks who voted for the members of Congress, they didn't get it. Now, there were about 5 members of Congress who kind of thought about it, particularly in the House, because they understood the impact that it would have on their community, on their communities. But what we have to do, they were running scared from Trump.
Yes.
We have to make sure they run scared from the people, from the people who actually elect them.
Yeah. It was something when Elon turned on Trump. I was like, oh my gosh, how times have changed so quickly.
I was taking an over-under. My vote was 6 months. I thought it would last 6 months. But
everybody was saying 6 months.
6 months.
I said there's
y'all was almost right at 6 months though.
Look, those are 2 big egos.
Marriage. I mean, too many egos in the house. Everybody knows, think they know the most, and you just knew.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about that, because Elon, back in January, he was like, yeah, I'm going to make sure all these Democrats get put out of office. Now he's like, if you voted for this bill, I'm going to make sure you get kicked out of office.
See?
But I always say that's because he realized that Democrats buy Teslas.
That's exactly right.
He's like, oh, wait, I got to go get these liberals back.
How the tables turn.
That's right. And then he realizes how much he was benefiting from that Inflation Reduction.
Yes.
So now that tax credit, all of that, out the window.
Absolutely.
Also, Tesla gets a lot of government money.
A lot.
Right.
So
I think like the large of anyone,
it is
most subsidized for being able to get breaks. If every other car dealer, no other car dealership or brand gets the breaks that he gets subsidies. So
well, and to give those billionaires the breaks that they got, it had to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
You couldn't just have it come from poor people.
Right.
It had to come from other folks. Mm-hmm. And that's what they missed. They missed the fine print. Well, it's kind of hard to read 900 pages, right?
Especially when you have that much time to read it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So we're going to do one fun fact before we wrap up with our rich lesson. You have been supported by, and you are a supporter of, and have a good connection with the Obamas.
That is true.
What has it been like? Because, of course, you have done such amazing work in your career, but to be able to have the support of someone like Barack.
It has been very humbling. And I remember early on in both of our careers, and I'm probably about 3 years ahead of him in law school, so we weren't in law school at the same time. But I remember the fact, because he was on law review, that he was exceptional. In fact, the running joke was, okay, so you were in the library studying, and I was trying to see what party was going on Friday night. That worked out for you, for both of us, I think. But the sincerity, the spirit of service was always so clear. And so it's been great to just see that growth, to see that opportunity come to pass. And whenever the Conference of Mayors or some other group got a chance to go to the White House, that was just always an honor of a lifetime to see that. And, but the funnest trip, you talk about a fun fact, was, they send this thing saying, Women's History Celebration, Sisters of Soul. So you don't know. They just say, come to the East Room. And so you go. Aretha Franklin, Patti LaBelle, Janelle Monáe, Jill Scott, Melissa Manchester, all on one bill, just killing it in the White House.
Yeah.
Would not trade that for anything.
Yeah, President Obama had the White House rocking like his whole time, 8 years there.
That's it.
He
That's
really
it.
did.
So that's why I was always nice to the folks in the Office of Public Engagement, because they kept me on the list, and I appreciated that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, we always like to ask our guests one question, and that is, what is your rich lesson? And this could be something that costs you nothing to learn or costs you everything.
So I would have to say that my rich lesson is always treat people the way you want to be treated. Because people, and we always know that we often hear that Maya Angelou said this, people may not remember what you said or, I think what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And so if you treat people the way that you want to be treated, they will remember how you made them feel. And, that's the golden rule. And everybody doesn't read the Bible and everybody doesn't go to church, but you can always treat people the way you want to be treated.
Thank you. I should have that in my house on my wall. That quote. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both for having me, and thank you for the work that you do, particularly in this tech space. My daughter has been in that space. I know it's not easy, and the fact that you are not only doing it, but you are succeeding and doing it well is such a beacon to young girls who will come behind you.
Well, clearly we're standing on the shoulders of giants, so thank you for leading
Thank
the
you
way.
for that.
Ms. Karen Freeman Wilson, thank you so much.